Welcome back to CBS News. I'm Lana Zach, and the jury in Donald Trump's criminal trial out of New York has returned to the courtroom, and so has the former president. I want to get back over to Jessica Levinson. She has been following all of this for us. So, Jessica, explain to us what's going on at the courthouse right now.
So the jury's doing exactly what we want them to do. They're going through the evidence and they're trying to figure out whether or not there's enough here to convict. And they're zeroing in on what I think is one of the key moments in this case, which is the meeting at the Trump Tower. They're trying to figure out if there was, in fact, this agreement to catch and kill negative stories about then candidate Trump. And they're trying to figure out if they can tie Trump to that agreement. And so all of this has always really been about two things. One was their criminal behavior, and two, can you tie the former president to it? And I think that the jury here is going to the heart of it. They're trying to figure out what was the arrangement between people like David Pecker, who ran American Media, which owned the National Enquirer. What was the arrangement that was made to try and gobble up and silence stories that were negative about then candidate Trump that could potentially hurt him with the voters? And they're trying to figure out if Trump knew about that, if he helped to direct this scheme. And so many things will fall into place for the prosecution if the jury believes what they explained to them and what their witnesses explained about that Trump Tower meeting. Last thing I want to note is, looking at the time, looking at these four questions, I don't think you and I are going to be saying today, and we have a verdict.
Yes, these questions from the jurors, three of them regarding David Pecker's testimony. One, the phone conversation that Pecker had with Donald Trump. Two, Pecker's decision regarding Karen McDougal's story and funding the assignment of those rights. Three, Pecker's testimony about that Trump Tower meeting that you just mentioned, Jessica. And then four, Michael Cohen's testimony about that Trump Tower meeting. Does any of this tell you about where the jury finds themselves right now in their discussions?
Right. Does this, and I think that the question, of course, also is, where are they? Meaning, are they just in the beginning, or are they close to a verdict? And who is this good or bad for? And so what I would say is the fact that they're zeroing in on this means, I think, that they are at least past the beginning of the beginning when it comes to the questions that they're considering here. I have to say, I think that Trump's team is probably not thrilled about these particular questions, because if you can, again, based on what they're asking, the particular witness's testimony that they're asking about, if the jury looks back at this and says, you know what, the prosecution was right, that's extremely powerful for the prosecution's case. Having said that, look, I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't point out both sides. Having said that, the prosecution, I'm sure, was really hoping no questions. They go back there and say, oh my gosh, can you believe he's not just a little guilty, he's absolutely guilty on all 34 counts. Let's take a vote and let's be home for an early dinner. And obviously that's not what's happening either.
Obviously that's not what's happening. I want to bring back in Errol Barnett, who's outside of the courthouse. And Errol, you pointed out that we still have a lot of questions, but one that we don't have is that this is a decision by the jury. Yet you have been following this case and you've been seeing those jurors. What more can you tell us about how they're sorting through these developments right now?
Well, I'll say, Lana, that it's interesting that within 4 hours of deliberation, the jury is requesting more information in the terms of transcripts from David Pecker's testimony, and that it relates to Trump Tower meetings that the prosecution says was the launch pad for this entire scheme to mislead the American public, hide negative stories so Trump could win the White House. But it's also noteworthy because David Pecker proved himself to be someone who, while testifying against Donald Trump, still considers himself an ally, a friend. He even considers Donald Trump a mentor of his. And so the jury is obviously taking that into consideration and really valuing his testimony. He agreed, according to his testimony, to be Donald Trump's eyes and ears on the campaign trail. And what the judge and prosecution laid out was that it wasn't just enough to prove that a hush money payment was sent out. It wasn't enough to prove that Donald Trump falsified the business records. In order for this 12-person jury to return a guilty verdict, they must believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump knew about this scheme, he implemented the scheme, that the other witnesses we heard for were effectively co-conspirators of the scheme, and that he benefited from it in some way. Pecker's testimony, in which he has conversations with Donald Trump while Pecker was in an investor meeting, certainly speaks to that connective glue and that connective tissue we've spoken about for so many weeks, which is crucial for the jury to return a guilty verdict. It's not enough to believe any one of these witnesses by themselves to return a guilty verdict. They must believe that Donald Trump implemented this plan, benefited from this plan, and if they do find him guilty on one of the 34 counts, it's likely, because these are all for the same effective offense, 11 checks, 11 invoices, and the corresponding voucher records, it's likely they will find him guilty on all 34. We don't know that for sure yet. Deliberations continue, but evidently 4 hours in, this is the information they want to see and have read back to them, is quite noteworthy.
And I'm so glad that you pointed out the relationship, Errol, between David Pecker and Donald Trump, because so much of what we heard from the defense was that you couldn't really fully trust in their minds the testimony that we were hearing from Michael Cohen, who had been a longtime confidant of the former presidents, but their relationship soured, or the relationship, or the testimony rather, from Stormy Daniels. Given the defense's positioning right now, Errol, I'm wondering if you can tell us anything more about the case that they are trying to make, because as you laid out, the prosecution has tried to say not only can you trust the testimony, you can also trust the records. But what did the defense have to say about all of that?
The defense was quite simple. Donald Trump never had the alleged affair with Stormy Daniels. He never told Michael Cohen to make the payoff. The defense says Michael Cohen decided to do that himself, and then Daniels and Cohen conspired to extort Trump for money. They also say, and they want the jury to believe, that despite that, Trump had a retainer agreement with Cohen after he won the White House in 2016 and simply paid him for those legal services in these multiple checks in the amount of $35,000 for those services, and ultimately cut ties with Cohen after he pleaded guilty to his role in this scheme. And that Cohen is just bitter. He's just someone trying to make money for his podcasts and go on a speaking circuit and continue to say all the things he said. The problem with the defense as they try to lay out that argument, particularly when they try to say to Cohen, you're just doing this for yourself to make money, Cohen actually shot back and said, well, I would actually make more money if Donald Trump was found not guilty of these crimes, because that would be more noteworthy and I could continue to speak and do what I do. So perhaps the defense's efforts to create an alternate reality from what the prosecution has laid out may not be carrying as much weight with the jury, which again just has to use their own common sense and believe that beyond a reasonable doubt that there's enough evidence in testimony, in the audio clips, the video clips, the cash, the communications between all the key players to believe that, yes, Donald Trump was behind this scheme and benefited from the scheme specifically to win the election in 2016. So the defense has shot back and tried to shoot holes in all of this. But if the jury wants to see this testimony, they are trying to make sure that they're making these judgments based on the law and based on what is beyond a reasonable doubt in their minds.
All right. The jury requesting 4 additional pieces of information as their deliberations continue. Errol and Jessica, thanks.